Ave cohort, it is Saturday. We're going to be doing some Pilum teaches DCS. I know this is later than the typical stream. So for those of you who are catching this as a VOD here in the next day, or those who happen to be watching this evening, just know that we normally do this much earlier in the day on Saturdays, depending upon, what the day job lets me get away with. So anyway, we are here, and we're going to be going through phase 2 of our F-4 Phantom training, focusing on advanced navigation type features for the jet, in-flight refueling, unguided bombs, and unguided rockets. So with that, let's go ahead and get on over into DCS so we can see those things in action. And as always, we're going to go and hop out of the jet for a minute and do our little walk around. On the outer pylons, we are carrying Mark 82 Snake Eyes for part of our unguided delivery stuff later on. On the inner pylons, we're actually carrying, I believe they are CBU 54 cluster munitions. Of course, we're carrying defensive Sidewinder and Sparrow arrangement, and we're carrying some Mighty Mouse Mark 5 rockets on the center line. Nothing super fancy. As far as our overall flight plan for today, we're going to be transiting to Creech Air Force Base, pushing out to the tanker track, refueling at our tanker first, and then continuing on mission. More or less, we're going to be getting in and simulating a little bit of a strike type package where we're going to go out, navigate to an area, and then conduct our attack after having refueled. So we have the gas to do the job and, in theory, get home. That's going to unpause. The jet's already started and rolling and ready to go. We've already just cleared prime sync. We'll set our takeoff trim and begin taxiing up. As far as the advanced with a giant star on the end of it,
hell yeah.
Features that we're going to be looking at today, a lot of it is going to be talking about the limitations of the INS system for the F-4 and how it misaligns over time and ways to correct that, as well as using alternative navigation instead of the nav computer in order to get from point A to point B, because...
So, are we going to be down in the trenches this go?
1 second, let's talk to Jester real quick. One of the features for the F-4 that is unique to the F-4 is that Heapler has modeled so much on the jet and the interplays of its various systems, how things retain energy over time, how things fail over time, how things degrade and wear down over time. So if you're out and you are flying and fighting hard, really loading the jet up with G's and getting into a heavy dogfight and come out of that one victorious, you might stumble out of that fight with either a badly misaligned gyro compass or flight control surfaces not quite as responsive as they need to. You might even be missing components of your hydraulic fluid pressurization system. Like you might lose your utility hydros in the middle of all of those kinds of fight. So understanding that sometimes it is a matter of something did in fact break or wear out on the jet enough that you're going to need to correct it is the important thing to recognize and pay attention to. And knowing how to get home is going to be critical at that juncture. Probably going to have a very brief ad break here in just a minute or two. It seems to be pretty normal about the takeoff point. And before we start going, we do have an expedient for Jester that can help out a lot. we're going to create our own steer point system. And before we slide out onto the runway here, let's go ahead and set that up. So I've laid down 3 mark points. What we're going to do is get into the navigation tab for Jester. We're going to edit the flight plan and primary flight plan. We have no turn points right now, so we're going to go ahead and add a turn point. And we're going to add via map marker.
Welcome.
We're going to insert a new point afterwards, also map marker.
Roger. Copy.
Now the important part here is that we've set these up with map markers, but you could also set those up using straight lat long, the pre-generated flight plan for the aircraft, whether you set that up yourself or what was already on board the jet, airfields, and assets. So you can create steer points to all of those different positions. Now that we've edited that flight plan, we're going to go ahead and go to
Okay.
TGT1, and Jester
All right,
will
flight plan steering resumed.
automatically cycle those waypoints as he hopscotches those for us in the jet. And put the flaps down. Get ready to take off. We do have an ad brake that's in process right now.
Engine's good. Airspeed's coming alive. 80 knots. 100 knots.
And 50, the nose is starting to come up. We are very heavy though. Let's get the gear and flaps up. And adjust our throttles here so we don't break anything.
Gear up.
And we're going to roll out towards Creech Air Force Base. Now, as far as the advanced features for navigation, if you see that there's some kind of misalignment with where your compass is going versus where the needle's at, because any portion of this compass and everything else can fail. So it's possible that the needle might be dead, so the arrow turner isn't spinning around and pointing to the direction that it needs to. It might be pointing to a wrong direction. But there are ways that we can double check that. And it would behoove you to, from time to time when you can, in flight. First one is, we know Creech is an Air Force base, and Creech has a TACAN. It's on channel 87. So we can set up for a known TACAN point and switch from nav comp mode to TACAN mode. We can see that the TACAN beacon, the arrow's moving around there, about 31 miles away. And since we just took off, our nav computer doesn't have a whole lot of misalignment or error associated with it, so it's telling us the same information. But you can use the TACAN to navigate, as generally speaking, that needle should always point to where it's receiving the actual signal. Unless that needle itself is dead and unmoving, but you should see it twitch in either event as you change your navigation input. It's going to maintain our climb here for a minute.
Mud, 12 o'clock. AAA.
Not a whole lot to talk about here, really, while we're cruising. We are very heavy, though,
All right, those are some nails.
and somewhat
2
slow.
o'clock.
It's going to be an important consideration as we get up to the tanker to try and attempt refueling. We're not going to get a full tank, but we are going to go ahead and top ourselves up to at least like 9.5, 10,000 pounds. While we're on our climbing out here, I'm going to take a minute just to jump into the back seat. As we talked last week about updating one's position and then the process by which that is done. I'm not going to do it right this minute because we don't have a whole lot of errors since we just took off. But we would take this switch and put it in set mode, which disconnects this system from the INS, and we basically update our position. That tells us, where in the northwest or northeast or southwest or what have you, or we are by setting our lat and long. These lights, these blue ones here, will illuminate when enough air has been corrected for that it will actually resync the compass. And then as we fly over that point, we will hold this fix switch down and we will release it at the moment we overfly our known position that we marked with the lat long. And that will restore accuracy to our system. It's easiest to do something like use a TACAN beacon because those are fixed. And the Wizzo can even see on their own compass that you're getting ready to cross over that waypoint. So they can just hold on to that switch, and as they cross that waypoint, let go of it. And then the INS system is re-engaged and doing its work. All right, let's go ahead and turn the autopilot on here as we get up to about 14,500 feet. Put the leveler on here, so it'll bring our nose back down to a level attitude. And we should be able to pick up a little bit of airspeed.
Alright, got good steering to the next turn point.
Alright, so we got close enough to Creech Air Force Base that Jester has updated us to the next turn. In the backseat, this basically entails one switching between TGT-1 and TGT-2,
Miles, 15,000.
as one will need to leapfrog between the different steer points
Positive IFF.
in order to fly around, as the onboard system can only store 2 waypoints at one time. Take a minute here and get resettled in my seat. We do have our coffee today. It's a Black Rifle plane today. Now that we're in sustained level flight, we've actually picked up to about 300 knots. I'm going to back off the flow rate there a little bit.
Got a bogey, left 5, 27 miles, 17,000.
Okay, so now we're going to want to set up for the tanker. In this case, we're going to be using this KC-135 that is cruising up at 19,500 feet. And I have gone ahead and put in his TACAN, which is 40 Yankee, and his radio frequency, which is 252, as part of his group name. And information might be found on an e-board or in the in-game mission briefing, as long as the mission author put it there. All right, so they are on 40 Yankee. Let's go ahead and change that TACAN over to 40 Yankee. We do that by manipulating the upper and lower ends of the dials there. And as we set for TACAN, we can see that our target aircraft is 28 miles away. And we know that he's at 19,000 feet, so we're going to have to climb up to meet him. Take the plane out of autopilot. Let's go ahead and give him a call and let him know we're on the way. We're going to open up the radio, select the tanker, and in this case I believe it is Texaco, yeah, Texaco 11.
Texaco 11.
It's very important that we up here make sure that we are broadcasting on the proper radio. As the F-4 only has one UHF radio. But if we just hit the comms button, it puts it on intercom instead.
Texaco 11. OZ 1. Request rejoin.
Alright, so what he's telling us is that he's somewhere between 19,500 and 20,000 feet. And he is flying at 270 knots indicated airspeed. We should be able to catch him and refuel off of him. But that is a concern, especially when we are cruising out to the target as a strike package in need of a tanker, because we are heavy and we are not very aerodynamic, which in the F-4 is saying something. We can see this TACAN arrow is drifting slightly to the right. He's currently cruising slightly away from us and ever so slightly right. He will reach the end of his track and turn around back towards us. And that should be about when we are going to be catching him. Take a sip of coffee here as we take that off of our coffee cup warmer. Tasty, tasty. All right, it's going to turn the autopilot back on. And we are 26 miles away from our tanker. We got a little bit of a hike to go. As we are cruising to go get gas, and at the moment fuel is not a concern, we'll just go ahead and leave the engines on mill power. But keep in mind for yourself, you know, if you're traveling from point A to point B, that you still have to have enough gas to get to the tanker, and potentially spend a little bit of time waiting in line as other people are refueling off of the tanker by the time you get there. I think that's him in front of us there, that little dot, roughly center of the field of view, slowly moving to the left. So he's in the process of turning around. And it's at this stage that I am going to go ahead and go into the crew contract for Jester and tell him, silence please. I would encourage you, if you are air refueling with Jester, that you make use of silence please. Jester will attempt to help you if you are, you know, fumbling about with the boom and everything else, trying to give you steering corrections and, you know, drift and everything else. But there's a problem. And that problem is that Jester's voice lines very frequently take longer for him to say than it is for his corrective input to be accurate. So what that means is that, you know, when you first start out, you know, he doesn't have any input, so if he's telling you things like up 3 or forward 5 or what have you, that's probably accurate information. But as you are maneuvering behind the jet, trying to get in position to refuel, his side commentary very quickly gets to a point where you are having actions happen that he has voice commands to respond to, and they get queued up for him. So eventually, he gets to a point where he is trying to give you corrective instruction, you know, forward 5, back 2, right 1, you're had it, you're teasing it, whatever. He's going to try and give you that kind of helpful information, but the information he's giving you is no longer accurate to where you are in the flight plan behind the jet. All right, half mile out, he's going to go ahead and put his boom down into position and turn his lights on. Now we know he's doing about 270 knots indicated, but that is an estimate. So what we're going to do first is slide into what's known as the observer's position, which is a position echelon left of the aircraft. And we're going to take the time to trim our aircraft for level flight, or nearly level flight, at his airspeed. Okay. Next, we're going to need to open the refueling door. And I'm going to pause here briefly as we talk about refueling in the F-4. The receptacle that the boom is going for is located on the spine of the aircraft behind the backseater. So the backseater should have a pretty decent view of the boom if they look up. There is a light that should help with refueling at night to try and illuminate that for the probe driver there in the back of the jet. And it is pointed back towards the spine of the aircraft and this receptacle. The other thing that we're going to be paying attention to is these lights. And as you can tell, we've got UD on the left and FA on the right. The right side is the fore and aft position keeper lights. So if the light is located right there next to the F on that first blinker, what it's telling you is that you are too far aft and need to come forward. The corrective action is go forward. As you get closer to the middle set of lights, the middle is where you really want to be. As you can see is where the double squares are on the left and right side. That's the most ideal position there for the tanker. With the one step out lights forward and aft being possible to maintain position and link up with the tanker, but you need to be taking corrective action. The left-hand side is your up and down indicator, which will tell you whether or not you need to be slightly higher in elevation or slightly lower in elevation to be in good position for the boom. For the back seater, watching the stripe is going to be very helpful for you. This is the halfway position down the boom, which is kind of its default little idle spot. If you are perfectly situated, completely unmoving in the fore and aft light position in the middle spot, that's about how it should look. You should only see about half of the green coming out the back of the boom, and that's going to give you the best flow rate and the most wiggle room there in your connection. As you get too close or too far, you'll see this telescope in and out a little bit. And again, it is mirrored, so on the other half of this is another little bit of green. As you get further up, it's a yellow stripe. And as you get super far up, it's going to be a red stripe, and that's the extreme ends of the jet. Communicating with your front seater to let them know, you know, whether they're charging the boom or whether they're about to fall off of it, you know, where they are on that slider, helps provide them with some good contextual clues to back up what they're seeing on the lights so that they can maintain good position to get the best flow rate out of the jet. All right, so now that we're here,
Ready for contact.
You will call ready pre-contact automatically when you are in good parameters and with the refueling door open. We're going to slide behind the jet. I'm going to close and reopen it here real quick. It is important to note too that at any point if you disconnect from the nozzle, you need to cycle the door before flow rate can be resumed. Otherwise he will tell you that transfer is complete when it very much isn't. I do like to zoom in just a little bit because as the pilot I'm not really fixated on what my fuel gauge is telling me. I really want to make sure that I'm flying the lights. However, I can say that the fuel gauge is kind of in my peripheral vision on the lower right-hand side under the RWR power panel. It's going to come forward here a little bit. This isn't something that you can just kind of put in a power input and remain static, as you are burning fuel in the jet, getting lighter all the time. As the weight changes and the center of gravity shifts, you may speed up or slow down. Relative to what your power setting is. So it's a constant game of manipulating very fine stick inputs, the lighter the better. The best pilots doing this will call it fingertip flying, as you should be able to maintain your position here with just the tips of your fingers moving the stick or other similar light inputs. And you're going to be manipulating the throttle to try and maintain fore and aft position. Keeping in mind too that because your nozzles are pointed slightly down, that as you input power you will climb, and as you take power away you will fall. Alright, we are disengaged because we got too close to the boom, so we're going to recycle the door.
Ready, pre-contact. You're taking fuel. Ready, pre-contact.
Fell a little too far out of position, but that's okay. Slowly ease back into place. Sometimes these are a little easier to hang on to in a turn. Sometimes you have to retrim the aircraft, especially once you've taken on a bunch of fuel to maintain position. Just be mindful of that. We're a little too far forward. Try and gently ease the power without losing too much altitude, nor slipping back too fast. And he's leveling out. It's giving us the disengage light, however we are still increasing in fuel. There it goes, it finally fell off. as we are up near the upper limits of the internal tank. So I'm going to go ahead and call that one good for now.
Report rejoin.
So we picked up a little bit of gas. Normally we would fall off and reform to the right, where we would wait for the rest of the flight to get their gas. Again, that's an important courtesy, especially when you're flying with other F-4s, as the last tank on the jet, because you know the Heapler actually models all of the individual fuel cells on board the aircraft, for whatever reason takes a lot longer to fill. Like, it fills much more slowly compared to the other cells on board the jet. So it is very quick to refuel from a low fuel state, you know, somewhere under 2,000 pounds of gas, all the way up to about 9,000 pounds of gas. And as you cross to about 9,500 pounds of gas, it really does start to slow way down. And trying to refuel from about that point to a full tank at 12,000 pounds takes almost as long of a period of time as it does to go from, you know, low fuel to about 10,000 pounds. Like, it takes it a minute. All right, so we've completed that. Let's go ahead and tell Jester that he can talk to us again. And just in case he hasn't already done it, we're going to go to waypoint 3.
Got good steering on the next turn point.
And just to make doubly sure that we're not about to violate airspace that we're not allowed to go into, we're going to go ahead and turn to the left. A note here about INS drift in the jet, because unlike a modern aircraft, like an F-16, an F-15, or
We have a
you know, similar,
11 o'clock, 8 miles.
there's no GPS to assist the INS in this aircraft to correct for errors over time, which is what a lot of those modern aircraft do. They will communicate with GPS satellites
Left 5, 7 miles, 19,000.
and provide the correction to the jet to make sure that all of your steering is, you know, pretty solid all the way through. Not so with the F-4. So with the F-4, understand that as you fly, the longer you fly, the more error creeps into both your compass and all of the ranging information. A good rule of thumb is that for every hour of flight that you are in the air, moving around, the gyro's doing its thing, you should probably perform at least one correction. And that includes any time spent on the ground. Like if you were cruising around for 30, 40 minutes or so, and then you landed and you took 10 minutes to, you know, rearm, refuel, refit, and all that other stuff, then perhaps you should take that time before you take off to realign the jet on the ground while you were at a fixed point, and then continue. Okay, so the first weapons that we're going to be dropping today for our unguided weapons are going to be our interstation pylons, which is where our cluster bombs are located. Let's see if we have an armament page in this knee board. The knee board's actually really good too for the information that it gives. CBU-52, that's what we're using. CBU-52 is an older school cluster munition. You can drop it in any of the unguided modes, which for our purposes we're going to be using dive toss because we're going to get some radar ranging information from the ship's radar. Put our Pipper in air to ground mode. But let's go ahead and pull up our bombing computer, and I'm going to pause here briefly while we talk about that so we don't get any closer to the target area. The bombing table is probably one of the most important features for unguided weapons delivery, and even for guided weapons delivery that's available to you in the jet. The core thing to understand about the F-4. There are a lot of things that you can use Kentucky windage for, that you can just kind of go by feel, dial a couple of settings in, and call it an afternoon. But if you're looking to get the most out of the jet, you need to become, front seat or back seat, very familiar with this bombing table, how it works, what it does, and make the best use of it. The super shorthand version of the bombing table and its importance is that this is going to give you all of the information that the Wizzo needs, whether it is Jester or a person, to plug into the onboard weapons computer system and help it solve the basic algebraic equations that are involved that the jet is going to use to go, you want a weapon to go from this point at this airspeed to this point on the ground. I'm going to base all of my information on how I tell you how to do that based on what numbers you're putting into the WRCS. Another way to look at that one is something like the Shrike. The Shrike's a really good example. You can loft Shrikes at an incredible distance. Incredible for the weapon. It's really kind of subpar when you start comparing it to, even slightly ahead generations of ARMs from other nations and everything else. But you can pitch a Shrike, and you can kill associated systems that its seeker had to look for using loft mode. Loft mode understands that the jet is going to be releasing that weapon 20 degrees nose up at a certain altitude and at a certain distance away from the target, and that moments before the pull-up had happened, the pilot should be pointed directly at the site. So if we know where we are, we know what our altitude is, we know how fast the missile will go, what ballistically that's going to look like after so many seconds. The one piece of information that is missing from that triangle in order to solve the equation is how high is your target off the ground above MSL. If I'm releasing a weapon at 15,000 feet, mean sea level pressure, I still need to know where the ground is, because out here in the mountains especially, like we're out here in the middle of the Nevada desert, there are places out here that are almost 7,000 feet up from mean sea level. I need to know what that information is in order to accurately put the weapon in a position where when I throw that weapon into the air at such and such an airspeed and such an altitude, because those two things are going to be whatever's on board the jet at the time when you throw it out there. But the one thing that you need to get the right pull-up cue is to know where the ground is. You can find that through a variety of means. Probably the easiest one is to run your mouse cursor over the top of where the target area you think is at and try and get an average elevation. A good example, our SA-6 friend is usually out here. I've turned him off for this training scenario. Most of the area around here is about 3,500 feet, plus or minus 100 feet, depending upon where you're looking. So if I'm like, I'm not sure what his exact position is because I don't have it here on the map, but I think he's around here. He's off the corner of this town. That's the last place I saw him. Well, what your Wizzo would be doing is busting out the old map charts, flipping through it on the kneeboard, and then consulting altitude rings and contour lines and everything else. In our case, we can just put the cursor over the top of the target, look in the top left-hand corner of the screen that we're staring at right now, and it says it's 3,560 feet. So we plug in 3,560, tell Jester and close. He plugs this into the onboard computer, the WRCS, and now we have the equation solved. So as long as we are flying at a good airspeed and we're flying at a decent altitude, generally I try and start my shallow dive towards the target area at about 15,000 feet. Sometimes a little higher, 16,000, 17,000 feet, depending upon the SAM system in question. And also depending on whether or not it shot at me, because, I might need to be lower from necessity. But if it knows what my airspeed is and it knows what my altitude is, and I'm pointed directly at the SAM site, getting that solid tone from the Shrike, knowing the target's altitude is the last piece of information that needs to be in the system, and that has to go into the bombing table. You can tell Jester and close, or you can tell the human Wizzo, hey, target's altitude is 3560 feet, and they will dial that in the back seat to get the computer ready to go. In our particular case, we're going to be using DT mode, which is dive toss. Our run-in speed is going to be just about 450 knots true airspeed. It's important to know that all of the calculations on these sheets, if it doesn't specify, it's going to be in two things: true airspeed knots rather than indicated airspeed knots, and there's a separate true airspeed speedometer in both seats of the jet. It's easier for the Wizzo to see it for theirs than it is for the pilot to see it for theirs, because the pilot's is tucked away above the bomb fusing switch, almost hidden underneath the cowling in the top left-hand corner of the jet. It's very difficult to stare at and also try and get good Pipper information and look that way. So on the attack run, Wizzo responsibility, call out that airspeed, so that you know where you're at for the agreed upon distance and all that. Release altitude. What altitude do I want the bombs to ideally come off the jet? We're going to make our release altitude, we'll call it 10,000 feet. And our target out here, roughly in this area here, this is all about 3,200 feet, plus or minus 50. So we'll call it like 3,240 feet, with a dive angle of 20 degrees. These stats that you put in on the top, it's also important to make sure we got the right bomb selected, because that's going to change everything else. So anyway, these stats here on the top are ones that you are putting in. The middle section here are derived. So because of the information that's up here, it is putting all of the information into the figurative slide ruler, and it is going to come back with your drag coefficient is 1.09. The Wizzo sets that in the WRCS. The bomb range should be 9,720 feet from the point of release to the target. The Wizzo can put that information into the WRCS. Bomb time of flight, 14.48 seconds. That's more for your own information to let you know that from the point of release to the point of impact should be about 14 seconds. So if you have other things that are time sensitive, such as the target is moving, you need to be planning that many seconds ahead to account for the bomb falling down for that distance. If we wanted to change anything else, such as the release interval or which bomb we want to hit the target directly. And in this case, we're going to be dropping cluster bombs. I kind of want the second bomb to hit the target more or less directly. So we've got some bombs that are going to be before and some bombs that are going to be after in a stick of 4. Jester will also set a release advance, so that way the bomb is released early so that the first bomb will fly slightly further of the target. The second bomb should hit directly on the target, and bombs 3 and 4 will fall behind the target at their interval set by this pattern. And do quarter-second release. So Jester's setting up our release advance of 250 milliseconds to make sure that bomb number 2 is the one that hits the target. All right, so let's go ahead and unpause. And we will tell Jester. Just to make sure that he gets all of the information in there. I'm giving him a minute to set those things.
Roger.
Okay. And then that is the true airspeed speedometer there for the pilot. Largely hidden by the air-to-air weapons selector and master arm identifier. Alright, weapons are armed. We are a little low for where we want to be. Using dive toss is probably one of the most accurate and quick methods of acquiring and dropping iron bombs on top of your target. I'm going to set up for a ripple release of 4 using our quantity selector, and our interval is a quarter second, 0.25. I told Jester that information, that way he programs the right release release delay. But we also need to make sure that we got that set up front correctly as well. DT mode, dive toss, basically uses the radar to provide ranging information to the computer. And what we do with that is we point the nose at the target, we tell our Wizzo to capture the target area. They will then lock the target as if it were an air-to-air return. And at that point we can begin holding the pickle button down and beginning a gentle climb to dive first and then toss the bomb towards the target area. It's extremely forgiving, so if you don't program a lot of the information that we just spent a lot of time talking about into the WRCS, you don't have to worry about it quite as much. The bomb should be accurate enough as long as you're not dropping just singles. It's an F-4, so you're basically in an environment where you should be dropping pairs of bombs, or 3 to 4 bombs at a stick. That's just kind of the way that tends to work. Obviously not the case for laser-guided bombs, but that is a separate matter. Alright, we're coming up on our target area. Our target's going to be that SAM site there in the middle. We are only doing about 350 knots true, but as we start diving down towards that target, we're going to pick those knots up real quick. Now again, we want bomb number 2 to be the one that actually hits the SAM site direct, which is what we've set our advance up for. We're going to come on down. Put the pipper kind of in the center of the target area, and I'm going to give a short press on the Jester contextual button.
Captured.
He reports captured. I'm holding the pickle button down, and we're now beginning our climb. And we got flashes because those pellets have already burst from their container, which might be an interesting bug there with that particular bomb type, but we'll see how it falls. Very pretty, but it did end up falling short because the bomb did not fall inside the canister. That's an interesting glitch with that particular bomb, because we were up high enough that they should not have separated as soon as we pulled the trigger, which is what those flashes were. Okay, well, we've got more bombs to deliver, so I think what we'll do instead is we will do a nose fuse only drop with our snake eyes, executing about the same way. So let's go ahead and set this up for Mark 82. Snake eye, low drag configuration. It does make a difference because the slicks, or the Mark 82s that are just built to do the standard ballistic work, have a different drag coefficient than these guys here that have the fins on them, even if the fins are not deployed. It's not a significant difference, but it's enough of one that it can spell the difference between a direct hit and a glancing blow. Same thing, we're up about 14,000 feet. All other bomb information remains the same. Thank you, Ihort. Alright, same thing here. We're going to go ahead and put our pipper near the center of the target area and capture. Pressing and holding the pickle button. Letting the nose come up. Oh, and I dropped 4. That's okay. That's kind of what I was looking for. And as we very quickly come down here to watch the target area, and one of our bombs hit the target area direct. A couple bombs go past it. Alright, let's go ahead and reset for dropping these in a high drag configuration. And we'll follow up on that target area with a high drag strike in direct mode. There's a few ways to do this one. One of the ways that I like to do mine is to do it a little bit by flying by the seat of my pants. I tend to set my pipper down to about 80 mils. And my intent here at this point is to be about 500 feet off the ground, which is what I've set my radar altimeter for. And we want to be flying at about 500 knots airspeed. In this hypothetical scenario, we're going to be trying to sneak up on said SAM site. So what we're going to do is push out to these mountains here off about our 10 o'clock. Come in nice and low, ease over the top of them, and conduct a strike on that general area with snake eyes. The expedient for this is that I'm basically using the pipper to try and line up with the target area. And just before the target gets underneath the nose and disappears from sight is when I'm going to start releasing those bombs. I'm going to set it for a slightly longer rippled pattern. It's going to be a 4-bomb strike again. And at this distance, if that were an active SA-2, we are probably well within his ability to, well inside of his minimum range, I should say. He's not inside of his ability to shoot at us. But either way, we don't want to expose ourselves to any gun pit defenses that might be there. Let's open the throttles up, get a little bit of airspeed up. Target area's in sight. Radar altimeters are generally mounted on the bottom side of the aircraft, so they don't work when they're not pointed at the ground. A little high, just bring the nose down a little bit. And ripple 4. It's good hits on the SAM site area and some of the targets that were before it. We'll come back and repeat that strike on the tight diamond that's out there too. As we got 4 more bombs left. Some of what we're seeing is a little bit of sympathetic detonations from bombs being a little too close together, as the blast frag detonates them before they hit the ground, which is why we only saw the 2 explosions there. Same song and dance, getting up to the target there. It's about to pass under the nose, and ripple 4. All those bombs hit extra close together and obliterated that target area. All right, we got about 5,000 pounds of gas. But we're going to go ahead and set ourselves up for rockets and talk a little bit about that. Generally, I tend to use about a 23 to 25 mil dot setting for my rockets in direct mode. Rockets do tend to be a weapon that I employ a little bit based on feel. They're kind of an area weapon, especially in the 2 and 2.75 inch rocket variety. Like, they are super small. The damage that you inflict is really critical of volume of fire. So there's a few settings that I tend to use. The first one is your ripple setting here controls the speed that the rockets are being thrown by. The lower that number is, the faster the rockets are going to come out of the pod. The higher the number is, the slower the rockets are going to come out of the pod. The speed of the rocket remains unchanged. This is rate of fire, what we're talking about here. So I do tend to dial mine down to somewhere in the 0.8 to 0.1 range. And we do have other settings here on this quantity selector wheel that have become important. C is continuous. It will empty one pod, then move to the next pod, then move to the next pod. P will fire one set of rockets from all pods that are currently selected. But S is the big one for us, as S is not single and P is not pairs. S is for salvo. And in salvo mode, it will fire rockets from all 3 pods simultaneously for as long as the button is held down. So if you're carrying one of those, 200 plus rocket loadouts here for the F-4, where you've got triple mounts on all of the stations, if you really wanted to rain hell and shoot all the pods at once, you would select all of the different pods that you want to fire. And then put it in salvo mode. Generally speaking, I like diving down on my targets to shoot rockets rather than shooting a glancing helicopter type blow up against them. Not really looking for a, line of damage. And if I'm diving down on it, that gives me a little bit of extra standoff range if I'm trying to shoot at something like a Shilka or a SAM site, or in this case, the large lozenge of targets. Okay, so there's our target area there. We're going to be shooting at that big diamond. I'm going to come back around here to the right and then we'll flip over and roll in on him. I also tend to do a sounding shot when I'm firing my rockets, where I will make sure that the pipper is steadied up and wherever possible, throw a short tap at it, see where the rockets are flying and laying, and then barrage the rest of the site. Alright, so here we go. We're swooping in. And here's our sounding shot. It's looking good. We'll torch the place. And pull out. Just drop my salvo switch there to full blast. I'm going to hang on the blades here for a minute while we turn around. 3,000 pounds of gas. Bring the power back down to idle. Steady up. Sounding shot. And we roll out. I don't know how many more rockets we got in the pod, but we'll shoot till it's empty. But as we can see at the distances that we're throwing these rockets at, 25 mils down on the pipper is just about right for the angles that we're using. You do have to kind of feel that one out a little bit. That's kind of the nature of the beast. And those pods are empty. The gun in the low rate mode here. Same school of thought with the gun. Something to be mindful of with the gun as you come in to do your initial sounding shot is that it does tend to put at least 10 rounds through it. And then it has a small clearing time. And then it'll let you shoot again. So I do tend to just kind of spray and pray a little bit with it. Shallow gun attacks are not advised for much the same reason why we almost crashed on that one. One, it makes you more of a target on the way in. And two, it's easier to get really transfixed by the slow rate of descent and lose the airframe. All right. Roll in on this guy. Walk the rounds onto him. And pull on out. Alright, 2,300 pounds left on the jet. Tell Jester we're fine. Get rid of all of our excess pylons there. Leave them for folks in the desert to pick up. Let's go ahead and get back to some of our more advanced navigation features here. Turn the TACAN on, and we're going to set that to 12 X-ray, which is Nellis's TACAN. And we're going to cruise the 50 miles home. We are quite a bit lighter since we've gotten rid of all of our stores and are down quite a bit in gas. It should mean that once we get to about 15,000 feet or so, we can cruise back on a lower power setting and try and stretch out our 2,100 pounds of fuel. J79s are very good at going fast and very good at burning gas. They were not designed to do other things. On the subject of more advanced navigational techniques here, though, we are going to go ahead and turn on the ILS frequency. and dial it into Nellis's frequency, which is 109.10, which we can determine by clicking on the base and looking at its information. The ILS box is lit up, but as we can note, the ILS is only for runway 21, and it's on channel 109.10. And we can see its TACAN there, channel 12. But this will provide us with some steering information when we switch over to an ILS approach.
45 degrees, 30 miles, 17,500.
And we should be at a good cruising altitude. I'm going to go ahead and engage the autopilot to hold our altitude.
IFF is good, that's a friendly.
Let our jet settle here for a moment. And then bring the power down just a little bit. So we're only burning about 3,000 pounds per side per hour. It should give us a cruising speed of about Mach 0.7. We are just under 32 miles back from home. It's out there under the nose. We know we're on the right course for the TACAN, so I'm just going to go ahead and briefly toggle things over to the ILS mode. So we can grab our course dial here and set it to 210, which is the runway heading. And we'll just lop on back to TACAN. TACAN is going to take us direct to the base. But so far we haven't lost any of our compass gauges. Our hydro looks good. We haven't put a whole lot of G's on the jet. But if we had components that were busted, fuel level's low. If we had components that were busted, there are good odds that some of the first things to go are, the INS compass and the compass itself. In which case we would have to rely upon our standby compass, which is free floating and problematic in anything other than level flight. But it will at least, broadly speaking, get you back to where you need to be, and then you can dead reckon from there. I'm going to start configuring for landing. I do like to turn my lights on, even during the daytime. Set for the landing light, and go ahead and raise the seat to its full extent. Nellis is just about right there in front of the mountain, right off the nose. And since we're up at 17,000 feet, we're going to go ahead and take care of putting the plane back in our control. Bringing the engine power down. And then beginning our gentle descent towards the runway. I'm also going to turn down my indexer volume so that it doesn't blast people's eardrums out when we're on it. And we're going to turn the flight director on so that we get needles information. And we are going to go ahead and transition to ILS approach. Other things that I found that are extremely useful for this aircraft are to go ahead and do things like shut down the radar as you begin making the approach, and close the shutter on your pipper glass. Landings, even a good one, can be a little jarring for the equipment, and the F-4, as it models that wear and tear, those things can have an impact on what systems are working on your second sortie and which ones are having some problems. Alright, so obviously we're coming up to the airfield, and we are somewhat misaligned for it, but we are just going to go ahead and keep flying towards the TACAN beacon. This allows us an opportunity to survey the runway. See that Freedom Park is out there, and there's some jets parked out that direction. Runway's looking fairly clear. Speedway's empty. Start getting the Morse code beeps here from the TACAN beacon and from the ILS onboard system there, which we're now having our needles are alive. They don't have the flag outs letting us know that they're off. And so with that, we will turn around and begin our approach. Generally, I don't deploy the landing gear any faster than 250 knots. And the flaps above 225. We're down below both those airspeeds now, so the landing gear is going to come down. And flaps are going to go to full flaps. We will retrim the aircraft to accommodate for that new drag. I believe on this particular runway the ILS needles are set up for a runway 21 left. We are above glide slope. And a little fast for AOA. Don't worry about the oral tone there. If you're doing it right, it should be beeping, yelling, and screaming at you as you get to on speed on AOA. As light as we are with only 1,000 pounds in the tank, we can actually get down to 150 knots. As you can see, having the chair raised allows us to actually see the runway. Where that would be occluded or deep below the nose.
300.
Idle power.
Land a bit harder. My mustache can stand in for my eyebrows.
Got the chute deployed. I'm throwing the speed brake out. Holding the vertical stabilizers all the way aft. Anything to create more drag on the airplane. It means we can save the brakes. Jester apparently thought we came down just a little rougher than he would have liked. Turn off the TACAN beacon. And the VOR ILS beacon. It's important to note that that system will not work and will not provide you with steering information if it's not turned on to give you the audio tone as well. So you can tile that tone down very low so you can just barely hear it. But if the system's tone settings is off, you will not get any needles information even if you're on the right frequency for the base that you're trying to land at. Still dragging our drogue chute behind us. It's not modeled in DCS at the moment, but I like to not leave FOD for people. You never know when some intrepid model designer will throw that downrange. So since we're past the active, we'll go ahead and disconnect from it and reset the arming switch there for the speed brakes and drogue chute. Speed brakes are fully retracted. Flaps are coming up. I don't have anybody else coming in at the moment, so I'm not going to worry about stopping to look before crossing the runway, but if you're on a busy server especially, you should. And we'll taxi off. Alright, as we cruise on down here towards the Thunderbird hangar, we've talked a lot about some of the other advanced navigation features of the jet, using the term advanced very loosely. We've covered in-flight refueling, picked up a few thousand pounds and conducted our strike. And we've covered some unguided weapons. The most important thing that I can say about the unguided weapons is that they all work about the same. Like you're taking a hunk of metal and you're dropping it ballistically off the jet to have it go from point A to point B and blow something up. There's a variety of ways to make that magic happen. Find the way that is most comfortable for you. But to kind of recap a little bit for you. Direct mode, as soon as you push the button, anything you're looking at arming there on that page will come off the jet. Doesn't care where you are, what's going on, whether or not it's got a laser, whether or not it's got, you know, anything on it. If it's in direct mode and it's a free fall bomb, you push the button, it falls off the jet. That has its advantages. If you've got a pretty good idea about where that bomb should fall or where approximately that bomb should fall and you're okay with the results, it's a way that you can very quickly dive onto a target and prosecute it. Go ahead and have the crew chief put the wheel chocks on.
Roger.
You can also use the bombing computer
Yes, sir. Wheel chocks are in.
to go ahead and come up here and key the information in. Now, as an example here, we've got our release altitude at 12,000 feet, running speed of 450 knots. We're dropping Mark 84s. Total aircraft weight matters at that point too. Dive angle, target altitude. Sight depression of 235 mils and a bomb range of 9,320 feet will put you on target to drop that bomb. So you can use this bombing table even for direct mode. We'll talk about it later as we get to phase 3 with some of the more advanced weapons and guided weapons. But target find, making sure that you have these numbers in here for target find is absolutely essential to having proper queuing information available to you for the pave spike pod in order to bomb the target and not have to fight the laser at the same time. Bombing computer is your friend. That's the big takeaway. Dive tossed or loft mode. all of these numbers here you can set up. You can set up a distance from your IP or your initial point to your target in nautical miles. And you'll get all the information for it. You know, I'm throwing a GBU 10. I'm coming in low at 5,000 feet, and I'm 2 miles away from my IP to the target. Release range should be about 7,000 feet. Here's your sight depression to get the target bomb where you want it to go, and it's going to be 10 seconds worth of flight time. In this way, you can have somebody buddy lacing for you and pitch a bomb up close using the DL mode and get a bomb into the zone to have somebody guide it in. You guys have loft, offset, instrument offset. A lot of those modes are functional, but are super deep divey to make that work. But again, the bombing computer is essential because you have to know where it is you're going, what altitude you're at, what loft angle you're going to be throwing things at. Like I got 20 degree loft. Four miles away from the target. Pull-up timer, 10.2 seconds. So you'll press and hold the pickle button, you'll get a tone, and then you have to pull up and pitch the bomb that way using that mode, delivery. Or WRCS to AGM-45. This is useful for loft mode shots with the AGM-45 and only loft mode shots with the AGM-45. But again, bombing computer is the key to weapons delivery, whether it is guided or unguided. But for your unguided weapons, broadly speaking, if it falls off the jet, it all functions about the same way, and we executed on that with low drag and high drag modes of the bombs. DT is probably my favorite mode to use in the jet for rapid acquisition and release. It gets the bombs where they need to very accurately and very quickly with a modicum of needing to set certain things up in the jet to get the bombs where they need to go. If I was in a cast type situation with the F-4, trying to provide a little bit of rapid response close air support over a target area, DT is the mode I would use exclusively. Unless I'm dropping laser guided bombs and I have a need for the pod and have to set up for the pod that way, DT is going to be what I want for somebody on the ground like a helicopter pilot to say, hey, you know, I've got heavy armor rolling down the road at this position. I need it struck. I got your position, target's marked, I'm rolling in. And a moment later, 2 bombs fall off the jet and hit the area. It's a very rapid way of making that work. Encourages a lot of good communication between you and your weapons systems officer.
Roger.
And as we go cold and dark here, before we step out and wander over to the Thunderbird wing to see how those people are doing today, and then maybe go try and track down where Russia is here on this base, which those who know, they know. Before we go and take a look and hang out with those folks for a little while and, you know, try and track down Old Man Rivers and figure all those things out, keep in mind lessons for today, and our next phase, phase 3, is going to focus on the more advanced weapons for the aircraft, which is going to include MACLOS guided weapons, electro-optical guided weapons, infrared guided weapons, all for air to ground, as well as laser guided weapons and the use of the PAVE spike pod. Should be a great time. We'll also make sure that when we get to something like phase 4, we cover the air-to-air type vehicles and move into phase 5. Phase 5 is going to be nighttime, which is going to be a lot of covering all of the things that we're doing already, but at night, where you have to try and rely and trust on the instruments in a jet that is inherently faulty when it comes to its instruments over the long term. With that, folks, a reminder for most of the folks in the United States that it is going to be daylight savings time starting tomorrow. We have on the screen our usual array of upcoming events, going with some flying time there on Tuesday, a little bit of classic games time. I do want to play Wacky Wheels. I do want to get back to playing classic games. Work just has been exceedingly busy, so when I got home, I not had the energy I wanted to get those streams going, but we'll get those back on track. More Arma time as we play our Antistasi campaign against the Galactic Empire. And then finally more Pilum Teaches DCS. We will be back on next week in the morning at the proper time. And that should make for a good flight as we move on to Phase 3 with the guided weapons. With that, folks, always ask for consent. Try to communicate as best you can to partners. Try to be genuinely decent human beings. And I hope you've enjoyed today's flying lesson. Catch it on the VOD if you've missed it. Catch it on the YouTube when it gets posted there once all the phases are complete, so I can post them just as one block and try and organize that a little better for folks. Take care. Have a great night. Pilum out.